You've seen the little bottle, the one that promises to manage your blood sugar, $30, sometimes $40, and it's empty in a month, so you buy it again and again. And the number on your meter barely moves. That bottle is what started this whole thing for me, because I found something that does the same job, maybe better, for about $2. A simple mix of fruit you can grab at any store. I stumbled onto it while I was digging through the archives of a government nutrition lab, and once I saw where the trail actually led, I couldn't understand why nobody ever told me. By the end of this, I'm going to hand you the exact mix, the exact way to prepare it, and the strange little step that makes it work far better than it should. The whole trail runs back to a paper written in 1927, when doctors called a certain fruit compound plant insulin. No special diet, no supplements, just what you can put in your kitchen tonight. It began on an ordinary Tuesday at my mother's kitchen table. She had 3 orange pill bottles lined up next to the salt shaker, and a receipt tucked under one of them. I picked up that receipt without thinking. $81 for 1 month, for pills that, in her own words, don't seem to do much. That number stuck in my head like a splinter. $81 a month, forever, for something that didn't work. And I thought there has to be more to this story. So I did what I always do. I started pulling threads. And the first thread was a question so simple it almost felt stupid. If human beings have had high blood sugar for thousands of years, what did they do before there was a pharmacy on every corner? People didn't just accept it, they lived. They worked the fields into their 70s. So what did they know that we forgot? That question sent me straight into the oldest medical records I could find, and what I found there stopped me cold. Long before insulin was discovered, doctors across Europe were treating high blood sugar with a fruit. Not a drug, a fruit. And they weren't guessing. In 1869, a French physician wrote in his notes that patients who ate large amounts of a particular dark berry passed less sugar in their urine, which, back then, was the only way anyone could measure blood sugar at all. He didn't have a lab. He had his own 2 eyes, and a pattern he couldn't ignore. That berry was the bilberry, the European cousin of the blueberry, smaller, darker, so deeply purple it stained your fingers like ink. And here is the part that made me lean closer to the screen. In 1927, researchers isolated a compound from that berry and gave it a name that sounds impossible today. They called it myrtlein, and in the medical papers of that decade they described it as vegetable insulin, plant insulin, because in trial after small trial it brought blood sugar down and kept it down sometimes for weeks after people stopped taking it. Read that again. Weeks, not hours, not until the next meal. Weeks. The effect lingered long after the fruit was gone, and that single detail is the reason I couldn't let this go. That's the 4 weeks you saw promised at the start. It isn't a marketing line. It's a 100-year-old clinical observation that somehow slipped out of the conversation. So one clue clicked into place. A real fruit, a real compound, a real name doctors trusted before modern medicine existed. But it left me with a much bigger question, and this is the one that kept me up at night. If we had a fruit that worked like insulin, cheap, safe, growing wild on hillsides, how on earth did it vanish from every doctor's advice? Where did it go? And more importantly, who benefited from it going quiet? Because the deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't a case of the knowledge being lost. It was a case of the knowledge being replaced. Here's what happened. In 1921, insulin was discovered in a laboratory in Toronto, and it was a genuine miracle. It saved lives that nothing else could save. I want to be clear about that. But something else happened at the same time, quietly, in the background. Once you could patent a medicine and sell it in a bottle, a berry that grew for free on a mountainside became worthless to the people who sell cures. You cannot patent a bilberry. You cannot put a wild fruit under a trademark. There's no profit in telling a man to walk into the woods and eat. So the research money went one way, toward the bottle, toward the pill, toward the thing you have to buy again every single month. And the fruit, the one with a century of observation behind it, got filed under folk remedy and left to gather dust, not because it stopped working, because it stopped being profitable. And I found the fingerprints of that shift in the old home medical guides from the 1800s and early 1900s. Berries for sugar sickness appear again and again. I read a household health manual from 1898 that recommended a daily serving of dark berries for anyone with a weakness of the sugar. By the 1950s, those same guides had scrubbed it out completely, replaced with a single line telling you to see your physician. The advice didn't evolve. It got amputated. That made me angry, honestly. Because my mother was sitting there paying $81 a month, and the answer, or at least a huge piece of it, had been sitting in the fruit aisle the entire time. But being angry isn't proof. I'm not a doctor, and I wasn't about to trust a berry just because a Frenchman in 1869 liked it. I needed modern science, real studies, real numbers. So that's exactly where the trail went next. And this is where it stopped being folklore and started being fact. Because it turns out the modern scientists never fully forgot. A handful of them kept quietly testing what those old doctors saw, and their results are almost hard to believe. Start with Harvard. In 2013, researchers there published a massive study following well over 180,000 people for years. They were looking at fruit and the risk of type 2 diabetes, and the results weren't even close. The people who ate the most blueberries, just a few servings a week, had a 26% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. 26%. From a fruit, not a drug, not a program, not a gym membership, a handful of berries a few times a week, but blueberries were only part of it. The compound doing the heavy lifting has a name, anthocyanins. That's the pigment that makes berries dark blue, deep red, and almost black. It's the same family of compounds as that plant insulin from 1927. The old doctors saw the effect. The modern scientists finally identified the cause. And when I saw those two ends of the trail connect the 1860s observation and the modern chemistry, that's when I knew I was onto something real. Then I found the study that truly floored me. At the University of East Anglia in England, researchers ran a careful trial on people who were overweight and at risk for diabetes. They gave them the equivalent of a serving of blueberries every day, and they measured insulin sensitivity, which is basically how well your body listens to its own insulin, the very thing that breaks down in type 2 diabetes. In 6 months, the group eating blueberries improved their insulin sensitivity by around 22%. Their bodies got better at using sugar, not because of a pill, because of a fruit they ate every day. And I kept finding more. Tart cherries, another dark fruit loaded with the same pigments, showed up in study after study for lowering inflammation and steadying blood sugar. Blackberries, even richer in anthocyanins than blueberries. There was a pattern forming, and the pattern was screaming at me. It was never about one magic berry. It was about the color. The darker and richer the fruit, the more of this compound it carried, and the stronger the effect on blood sugar. If you want to go deeper into how all of this connects the history, the science, and the exact steps, I've put it all together in something you can keep. It's a digital book called First Fixes, and if you want to go further, Deeper Fixes and the Full System take you through every layer of this trail in the order I found it, so you have the whole picture in your hands, not just the pieces a single video can hold. You'll find the link in the description below. It's there whenever you're ready. So another clue locked in. The science backed the century-old records. The fruit was real, the compound was real, and the numbers were serious. But now I had a new problem, and this is the exact problem you're probably thinking about right now. Fresh berries are expensive. Wild bilberries don't grow at my grocery store. So how does an ordinary person on an ordinary budget actually get enough of this to matter without spending a fortune? Because if the answer costs more than the pills, it's no answer at all. That's the question that turned this from a history lesson into something you can actually use. And the solution I found is so cheap and so simple, it almost made me laugh. Now I want to talk directly to you, yes, you, sitting there thinking this sounds nice for people with money and a fancy kitchen, but not for a regular home on a fixed budget. This next part is built specifically for you, because everything I'm about to describe uses what you already own, costs about $2, and can be started tonight without buying a single special thing. No blender required, no supplements. No trip to a health food store with the prices that make your eyes water. Here's the first thing I learned, and it saves you money immediately. You do not need fresh berries. You want frozen ones. A bag of frozen blueberries, or frozen mixed berries, costs a fraction of fresh, often $2 or $3, for a bag that lasts a week or more. And here's the part almost nobody knows. The part that turns a budget shortcut into an actual advantage. Frozen berries can deliver more of that blood sugar compound than fresh ones. I found this in the food science research, and it stopped me in my tracks. When a berry freezes, the water inside its cells turns to ice, and those tiny ice crystals rupture the cell walls from the inside. When the berry thaws, all those anthocyanins, the pigment locked inside the cells, spill out and become far easier for your body to absorb. A fresh berry keeps a lot of its good stuff locked away behind cell walls you'd have to chew through perfectly. A frozen, then thawed berry hands it to you on a plate. The cheap option is the better option. How often does that ever happen? So here is exactly what I did, and what you can do the moment this video ends. Take a small handful of frozen dark berries, blueberries, blackberries, or a mixed bag, whatever's cheapest. Let them sit out for 10 or 15 minutes until they're soft and the juice starts to run. Eat them just like that. That deep purple juice pooling at the bottom of the bowl, that's the medicine. That's the Myrtillin those doctors wrote about in 1927. Don't pour it down the sink. That juice is the whole point. And now the timing, because timing is where this quietly becomes powerful. I learned to eat the berries right before or right alongside my most carb-heavy meal of the day. The one with the bread, the rice, the potatoes, the meal that sends your blood sugar climbing. The polyphenols in those berries actually slow down how fast your body breaks starch into sugar. They put a brake on the spike. So, instead of your blood sugar shooting straight up after dinner, it rises gently and comes down softer. You're not just eating fruit. You're changing how the whole meal behaves inside you. Let me give you the routine as plainly as I can, because I know you want something you can actually follow. A small handful of frozen dark berries, thawed until juicy, eaten with your biggest starchy meal every single day. That's it. That's the whole practice. It costs about $2 a day at most, often less if you buy the big bag. Compare that to $81 a month for pills that don't seem to do much. Over a year, you're talking about the difference between a few $100s of fruit and the endless, grinding cost of a bottle you have to refill forever. And I want to answer the doubt that's forming in your mind right now, because I had it too. You're thinking, if it were really this simple, my doctor would have told me. But think back to what the trail already showed us. Nobody makes money telling you to eat a $2 bag of frozen fruit. There's no sales rep visiting the clinic to promote blueberries. There's no advertisement, no patent, no commission. The silence around this isn't proof it doesn't work. The silence is exactly what you'd expect around something that works but can't be sold. But even as I wrote down that daily routine, I knew I still hadn't reached the bottom of this. Because a nagging detail from that 1927 paper kept pulling at me. Those old doctors didn't just say the berries lowered blood sugar, they said the effect lasted for weeks. And a handful of frozen fruit at dinner explains a gentle daily improvement, but it doesn't explain weeks. So there had to be one more piece. One thing those early researchers understood that even the modern studies had glossed over. And when I finally found it, buried in the details of how they actually used the plant, everything came together. This is the part I really want you to hear, because this is where the trail ends, and it ends somewhere I never expected. I went back to the original source. Not a summary, not a modern article quoting it, but the actual line of research from the 1920s preserved in the medical literature on Vaccinium myrtillus the bilberry. And what those researchers documented was something the fruit-only story completely misses. They weren't only using the berries, they were using the leaves. They made a tea, an infusion, from the dried leaves of the same plant, and that leaf tea was where the long, lingering, weeks-long effect actually came from. The berries give you the quick help, the softer spike at each meal. But the leaf of that same berry plant carries an even higher concentration of the compounds that improve how your body handles sugar over time. Traditional European healers, going back generations, would dry the leaves in late summer and brew a cup of that tea daily. And the modern analysis backs it up. Bilberry leaf and its close relatives are rich in exactly the polyphenols that support steady blood sugar. The old folks weren't just eating the fruit. They were drinking the plant. And here's how this reaches your kitchen, because I promised you something you can actually do, and I keep my promises. You don't need to hunt for wild bilberry leaves on a European hillside. The everyday grocery store carries the answer already, sitting quietly on the tea shelf. Ordinary blueberry plants, blackberry leaves, and this is the one that surprised me most plain. Humble green tea and hibiscus tea carry the very same family of compounds. Hibiscus, that deep red sour tea, is loaded with the exact pigment we've been chasing this entire time. That's why it's so dark red. Same color, same compound, same effect. So here is the complete method the trail finally gave me. The full $2 routine, start to finish. Every day, you eat your small handful of thawed, dark, frozen berries with your biggest starchy meal, juice and all. And once a day, you drink a warm cup of hibiscus or blueberry leaf tea, plain, no sugar. The berries handle the daily spike. The tea builds the deeper, longer effect, the 4 weeks those doctors wrote about 100 years ago. Together they do what one alone can't, fruit and leaf. Exactly the way it was done before anyone thought to put it in a bottle and charge you every month. That's it. That's the whole secret. A bag of frozen berries and a box of tea, somewhere between $2 and $3 for a full day. Discovered in 1869, named plant insulin in 1927, confirmed by Harvard in 2013 and by the University of East Anglia soon after, and quietly left out of every conversation because nobody could profit from telling you. Now, let me be honest with you the way I'd want someone to be honest with me. This is not a replacement for the medicine your doctor prescribed, and I'm not telling you to throw those bottles away. If you're on medication, especially anything that lowers blood sugar, adding these berries in this tea can push your numbers down further than you expect, which means you absolutely have to tell your doctor and keep checking your meter. That's not a disclaimer to protect me. That's me telling you this actually works strongly enough that you have to respect it. The people in 1927 respected it. So should you. But think about what this really means. For 100 years, we've had a simple, cheap, food-based way to help steady blood sugar sitting in plain sight in the fruit aisle and on the tea shelf. Our great-grandparents knew it. The home medical guides of the 1800s printed it, and it was slowly erased, not because it failed, but because there was more money in the bottle than in the berry. My mother paid $81 a month for years without ever knowing that the frozen fruit in her own freezer was carrying the same secret those old doctors trusted. That's what this channel is really about. Not tricks, not gimmicks. It's about the useful, honest knowledge that got quietly buried so someone else could sell you the replacement, and about digging it back up and putting it back in your hands, where it belonged the whole time. Every generation before us knew how to take care of itself with what it had. We didn't lose that knowledge by accident. It was taken, and piece by piece, I'm bringing it back. So here's what I want from you, and I'm asking directly, because I know you won't do it unless I do. I told you about the freezing trick, the way ice crystals break open the cells so a cheap frozen berry actually gives you more than a fresh one. That one surprised me more than anything else on this whole trail. I want to know if it surprised you too. Drop a comment and tell me, did you already know that frozen berries could beat fresh ones? And while you're there, tell me where you're watching from, because I read every single one, and I love seeing how far this old knowledge is traveling. If any part of this trail gave you something the pill bottle never did, then you belong here. This is a gathering place for people who refuse to believe that everything worth knowing has to come with a monthly charge. People who trust their own two hands and their own kitchen. Subscribe and stand with us, because the recovery has only just started. And I'll leave you with this, because the next trail is already pulling at me. There's an old kitchen spice one that's almost certainly in your cabinet right now, costing pennies, that a United States government lab in Maryland tested and found could lower fasting blood sugar all on its own. They published the numbers, and then, just like the berry, it got quietly shrugged off. I've started following that trail too, but that's a story for next time. Bring your tea. That's where this video stops, but the story doesn't. Inside the Timeless Ways circle, I pick up right here and take you further. And if something isn't clear, you can ask me directly. A real person answers. Myself or my team. Never a machine. You won't be doing this alone. Folks like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel any time.